The lining now gets tacked to the jacket, and we're going to be completely closed up after that. So what you want to do is to take your lining, make sure it's really nice and flat. Sometimes it helps to put a few pins in it while it's on the dress form so it's got some shape so it stays in place. What you want to do is to take whatever hem allowance ends up happening, and again, because things shift and stretch, it's never going to be exact. And what you want to do is to take this hem and fold it up so that it is 3/4 of an inch from the actual hem of the jacket to where the lining ends. And if you have enough seam allowance, you can pin it in place. I actually really recommend what you do is to pin it in place, baste it, put it back on the dress form, make sure it's not pulling, and then actually hem it. So you're going to do that all the way across. Here, actually, again, ignore this because this is not the lining for this jacket, but this will be folded. So you do have to peek under your vent. Make sure that the hem is there. The vent will go right over it, like so. And then the one place that I really would like to talk about is this corner. In tailoring, this is probably this little, what ends up usually being a little, maybe 3/8 of an inch, not quite 3/4. This is the only raw seam that is ever acceptable in tailoring. Now, it's actually another way that you can tell a bespoke jacket is when you see a very simple cross stitch here just to hold the yarns of the fabric in place. So typically this is very tiny cross stitched, so you're almost encasing the raw edge. Just a quick sample of what I was referring to before. And I did them in pink, obviously. Here I would do them in black. But just a really tiny cross stitch that's going to catch those yarns that are exposed will go up about 3/4 of an inch. You can go up a little further if you want. Make them really tiny. These are actually even a little bigger, and I probably would start down one more here to do it, but just little cross stitches. So the same thing that we use to do our internal hem, except now they're going to be really tiny. Edge. So that's one way you could do it. You could run yourself a little cross stitch here and then fold your lining up all the way across like so. Okay, so that's one way. The other way you will see in ready-to-wear mass manufacturing is that manufacturers will take the lining down to the end and then taper it. Let me see if I can give you a good example. Taper it so that it is here. Maybe zoom in again a little bit more, a little closer, so that it gets pretty close to the edge and it catches that raw edge of the facing, and then it tapers. So then you kind of taper this from whatever that catches up through the rest. So it comes at a little bit of an angle like so. So it's a little bit more of an angle like so. I'm probably going to recommend that you do it the traditional way because in some ways it's neater and faster, more accurate. Once you've got your hem, you've decided on what you're doing here, and you've got your hem pinned up, then what you're going to do is give it a really good press. And again, checking it on, even if you pin it and don't take the time to baste it, press it and put it on your dress form. Make sure it's not pulling. And then what you're going to do is this time you're going to, and again I'm going to use a contrasting thread so you can see, this time you will do a regular hem stitch. But the trick here is going to be that Another zoom in. The trick here is going to be that you pick up, you're going to take where your crease is from pressing. So now I'm 3/4 of an inch from the edge to here is 3/4 of an inch. Now I'm going to fold this back about 3/8 of an inch, and I'm going to pick up the jacket, and I'm going to pick up the back side of the lining. So I'm not going all the way through. See how that's moving? I'm not going all the way through. I'm picking up the back side of that crease and stitching. Obviously, I'm going the wrong way here because of the awkwardness of the position I'm in. But this will be a regular hem stitch. So just like you've learned to hem things in the past, that you'll pick up, again, picking up the hem allowance, picking up the back side of the lining, not going all the way through so that you have that roll, and pulling. So this is a regular hem stitch now. Let me do a few more just so you get an idea. So again, about a half, this you can go a 1/2 inch. Again, I'm going backwards, or it's backwards for me. If you're left-handed, you're probably following this just fine. Okay, so there I go. My lining's free. You're going to see a crease because you're going to press. But this is actually good that it's not pressed for right now. So now that you can see that I've got that little extra roll, and that's really meant for your pulling, wearing your jacket, raising up your arms, reaching forward. It allows the lining, that little ease allows the lining to shift. Okay, so that's your lining, and that's it. The last thing is going to be to sew the buttons on. So let's take a look at that. Attaching your button. So the one thing that you don't want to do is to sew your button flat to the jacket. The button really needs to rise so that it can accommodate the thickness of what you've got going on around the buttonhole. So of course around your buttonhole you've got all these layers of fabrics from binding the buttonholes, so you don't want it to be that the button goes through and it's so tight against the jacket that it pulls. So what we want to do is to create what we call a shank for the button. Some of your buttons will come with shanks, and a shank, a good measurement size for a shank is about 1/4 of an inch. So if you've got a good 1/4 of an inch on your button, you're all set to go. You can go ahead and put your buttons on. If a shank is a little shallower, like this button, you may want to do the process that I'm going to show you right now, which is a hold button where you need to create the shank. So let's concentrate on the hold button. So we know that on the other side of your jacket, across from your buttonhole, you'll have a blank canvas, and it's going to have all kinds of thicknesses. You'll have your horsehair and your facing and your fabric. So when you sew your button on, you want to make sure that you don't go through to your facing, that you're just picking up really the surface. Okay, so here, I might as well just do it right here on this sample. Okay, so your knot is, make sure your knot is nice and neat, not like this one. And you're going to go through your button, out the other side, and now when I go to pick up again here, I'm going to go in the same hole, I'm going to go out the same hole on the other side, and I'm going to pull. But what I have now is I want to create that 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to hold the button up 1/4 of an inch, And in the case of this button, I'm going to go through twice. So in and out the holes and across twice. So that I've allowed a 1/4 of an inch there. Now I'm going to take my thread and I'm going to wrap it. And I'm going to wrap it until I get a nice, thick, sturdy look. I do want to leave enough, make sure you use enough thread. And this is a very, very important place for waxing. Then what I'm going to do is to come over to this side. I am going to knot on the right side of the jacket at this hole, and I will snake it through and I will knot again on the other. So the other side, both sides will get a knot, and again knotting off twice. So you want to make sure that you catch the threads. Hopefully you can see that. Catch the threads. Then once you've knotted it, you're going to take your needle and you're going to do the little trick I showed you, which is burying your tail. So just snake in underneath, come out far down the line so that your tail is really nice and buried. And then you can clip. So now I have a button with a shank, with a homemade shank. So make sure you use lots of thread. Again, this is a place in sewing where double thread is welcome, but all your knots are to the outside, so you should see nothing on the other side. And that way when it goes through the buttonholes, I am going to have to do this backwards, so excuse me. But when it goes through the buttonhole, that it's sitting on top of the jacket. It's not squishing it and pulling it, but sitting on top of the jacket. Okay? So double thread, wax it. If you have a 4-hole button, it's the same process. Just add 2 more holes to what I showed you. And make sure when you knot off in all 4 spots. There's also a thread that you can purchase that's called buttonhole twist, and that's a great thread to have for putting buttons on. However, at this stage of the game, a double thread of your coordinating, doubling up the thread of the that matches your jacket will be fine. Okay, and that's it. Again, make sure you have your jacket pressed professionally and maybe over break, and then you can put your buttons on. And I'm looking forward to seeing all of these when we get back from our winter break.